For centuries, humans have been growing alongside our botanical brethren. Our histories have mixed and mingled to bring us modern medical marvels, faded folklore, and everything in between. Of course, in order to understand the plant, we have to start with its roots. I'm M. Grubner Gaddis, and this is Rooted. Hello, and welcome back to Rooted. This week on the podcast, we're digging into pansies, a bloom with almost as many petals as it has stories. Before we dive into the folklore and fancy pants uses of it all, we've got to go over the plant facts. Pansies, or Viola tricolor, are members of the Violaceae or violet family, with famous cousins like, violets. Native to Europe, they can now be found pretty much everywhere, as they are one of the most, if not the most popular landscaping plants in the world. And as the edible flowers most fancy restaurants and bars are adding to their spring menus right about now. This is largely thanks to pansy connoisseur Lady Mary Elizabeth Bennet, who dedicated her life to collecting rare and well-known varieties, as well as working closely with her family's gardener, William Richardson, to develop plenty of new ones. Known for their bright, five-petaled faces, pansies come in a variety of bright colors, with up to 3 on a single bloom. They only get a few inches tall, with probably about a 2-foot spread, if that, but with such a variety and ease of care, it's no wonder why people love these guys. Pansies are typically grown as annuals, with a strong preference for moist but not too wet soil. They do tend to reseed like crazy when they like it somewhere though, so it's not uncommon to see them popping up year after year. The whole violet family has a kind of weird little quirk when it comes to reseeding. They actually have ovaries that split into 3 equal portions. It kind of looks like a Demogorgon mouth from Stranger Things if you've seen that, and each creepy little mouth is filled to the brim with tons of tiny seeds, which they literally just shoot out wherever the wind takes them, which is honestly not too far away since they kind of like to stay close together as like a creepy little Demogorgon mouth family. Now that we've got a better understanding of who they are, let's take a little bit of a deeper dive into how the heck we got here. In ancient Greece, the widely accepted myth is that Cupid is to blame for the colorful blooms. The story goes that one day Cupid was out doing his thing in the field when his arrow missed its intended target, piercing instead a bright white pansy. Upon being stuck, Cupid's magic bled into the plant, turning the area a deep purple and permanently infusing this plant with Cupid's potent love-related powers. In a slightly less fun tale, Zeus, well-known adulterer and all-powerful scallywag, made the flowers as an apology to his then-girlfriend. In this instance, Zeus had been fooling around with a woman named Lo, and when Hera found out, she was ready to kill her. So, in order to protect his lady, Zeus decided to do what any rational person would do. He turned Lo into a cow to hide her from his wife. Now, obviously, Lo didn't love this situation, so in an attempt to make it up to her, Zeus decided to make the field she grazed on entirely out of flowers, throwing in a striking new one, a pansy, for good measure. In my mind, he could have maybe just turned her back into a person again and given her a different face or something, but what would I know? I'm not a Greek god. Anyway, these plants aren't just used to spread love or make things up to your lady on the side. They are also absolutely bursting with wild superstitions. In a German wives' tale, it's said that picking a pansy while it had dew on it would knock away your prosperity, wealth, and love life, so it was best to just leave them be. And if you thought that was a lot of weight to put on a tiny flower, you clearly haven't studied King Arthur's knights, who literally lived and died by their interpretation of what these flowers' features meant. For instance, they believed the lines on the face of the flowers were divine signs and warnings. 4 lines meant hope, thick, left-leaning lines indicated a life of trouble, 7 lines meant consistency of love, 8 was a sign of fickleness, and 9 meant that they would soon have a change of heart. And the knights listened to these signs and made life-altering decisions based on pretty much whatever they thought the pansies said, leading to a lot of England getting really into them. One such Englishman was William Shakespeare, who really leaned into the love-bringing elements of this flower in both A Midsummer Night's Dream, where Puck employs pansy eye drops to make Demetrius fall in love with whoever he sees first in the morning, and in Hamlet, when Ophelia, having lost her mind, starts explaining that pansies are for thoughts and really just rambling on and on about things that kind of make sense, but don't. This is because pansies were, before symbolizing love, thought to symbolize someone being deep in thought. And this is because in midsummer, once the blooms start getting heavier, they kind of look like little people just like drooping their weary little heads, thinking really hard about something, which is honestly kind of adorable. Speaking of floral symbolism and messaging, it should come as no shock that our Victorian pals were kind of obsessed with pansies in florigraphy. They were often used to send messages of deep, enduring love. So if someone sent you one of these bad boys, it meant they really liked you. Like, you have bewitched me, body, mind, and soul levels of love here, people. With that in mind, it's probably not that shocking to learn that pansies are often employed in love spells, either to make a romantic connection deeper, or to get that person you're pining after to finally look your way. Interestingly, they were also used to treat heartbreak, which makes the names Love Lies Bleeding and Heartsick make a little bit more sense. Back then, though, heartbreak was considered a disease of the body, not the mind. So when you were heartbroken, you went to a doctor who would prescribe you a pansy tea or potion and send you on your way. While pansies haven't been shown to help with symptoms of sadness or depression, they have been used in a lot of ways for many years. My personal favorite use, mostly because it's so out of left field, is actually in the treatment of syphilis. Doctors at the time would typically prescribe a tincture for this one, but in other uses, pansies was often part of an ointment or strong tea that would be applied topically to soothe and heal skin issues like rashes, sores, etc. It's effective in this use case due to the polyphenols it contains, specifically quercetin, which has been used to reduce inflammation, soothe irritation, and help the skin barrier heal by essentially blocking the free radicals that cause inflammation in the first place. They kind of just show up to the party and tell those free radicals to stop being jerks, and for that, we're all extremely grateful. As a bit of a fun fact, at the time of recording this, my lymphatic system is actually throwing a bit of a hissy fit. So I've developed what could only be described as an absolutely gnarly armpit rash. Truly, it's the pits. Thanks a lot, body. But the research for this episode has actually been kind of a lifesaver because I was able to make my own little concoction to help with the pain and irritation by making a strong extraction of pansy, calendula, and lavender. Shout out to that blend for making it possible to lift my arms again. In another interesting but mildly life-saving twist, pansies are also used often as an early way to teach children about botany, as it's really easy to see all the parts of the flower. This one's kind of a wild ride, so strap in and be sure to check our Instagram for the visuals, as always. Anyway, this story comes from the blog Wallflowers and Cards, so shout out to them for putting all of this together in a way that's way simpler than everything else I found on the internet. The story goes that a happily married king and queen had two lovely daughters who were charming and accomplished. Alas, though, the queen died, and the king eventually remarried a woman who had two daughters of her own. The new queen grew jealous of the compliments given to her stepdaughters and did pretty much everything she could to make their lives absolutely miserable. She only let them wear ugly plain clothes, while she dressed her own daughters in super colorful, expensive gowns and all of the finest jewelry. Her own attire was even more fancy than her daughters. So that's given kind of they're the three super pretty stripy petals, and then the other daughters are just the two petals at the top who are bigger and kind of plain. And then the king is just this little guy in the middle, and we'll get to him kind of at the end. Anyway, the king has 5 large chairs that kind of surround his throne, And the super rude queen makes her two stepdaughters sit in like one chair together. She's like, your guys' outfits are really ugly anyway, and it doesn't matter if they get wrinkled, so share a seat, please. And at this point in the story, teachers would remove the two bigger upper petals to reveal a single green quote-unquote chair, which is actually a sepal, which, as we know, is a modified leaf that kind of wraps around the bud of the flower, so it's really only there until the flower opens, and then we don't see it anymore. But it protects pests and things from getting in there and munching on the petals before they're ready to open. Then the stepmother gives each of her daughters their own chair, and they kind of reveal those petals to show that there's two more chairs there. And then she takes two chairs for herself because her skirts are so beautiful and lavish. Like, she can't risk them getting wrinkled. She really needs to splay them out. So she's kind of spreading them out. And then when you pull off that bottom petal, there's two sepals there. And eventually the stepmom, like the king, kind of figures out, he's like, wow, she's being like really mean to my kids for no reason. And finally he's like, you guys need to leave. So he kicks them out. He's kind of in the center. And she's pissed, obviously. So she's like, I'm going to get revenge on you one day. And the king didn't know this, but she had magical powers. And she casts a spell that causes the king to have to sit on his throne with his feet like plunged in boiling water forever. So then they pull apart everything else. And when they do that, it kind of reveals two little legs that look like they've been boiled. It's a little bit graphic in terms of the story, but not in terms of the plant. But once it's all removed, it looks like he's seated, just kind of sitting there by the green quote-unquote chairs, and he's wearing what they say is a robe with a golden collar. And then the extremities are encased in a light blue quote-unquote container, which they say is a tub of scalding water. And if you were to gently pull off that tub and carefully separate what's left, it shows those two little legs, which realistically, the head and the body of the king are the pistil, which is made up of a stigma and an ovary, so the female parts of the plant. And then his legs, his tiny little parboiled legs, and his robe are the stamens, so that's kind of what pollinates the plant. It's really kind of an unhinged way to teach parts of the flower, but if it was good enough for those tiny German kids back then, it's gotta be good enough for me. Definitely more than I was taught in school. So the next time you stumble upon a pansy, which is probably just about every day if you live in a city right now, I hope you'll take a moment to stop by and say hello, and maybe even consider what secret messages about life and love it's holding for you. I'll be back next week with another plant for us all to get potentially too excited about, but for now, I hope you all know that you have bewitched me, mind, body, and soul. Thanks for being here and for hanging out in the windy and cursed garden corner of the internet I'm making. I'm really glad you're here. Until next time, be kind to yourselves, be kind to the earth, and just like a plant, drink your water. If you liked the show, please subscribe and consider leaving us a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere else you listen. You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram at rooted.pod. We're finally updating regularly on YouTube at rooted.podcast, and you can check out our website, rootedpod.com, for transcripts, updates, merch, and so much more. The show is written, produced, and hosted by me. I'm Grebner Gaddis, edited by Kat Friend of Friend Diagram, and our theme music was written and produced by Eric Cluxon. Rooted is a Henbane Media LLC production.